No cowards ever make history. It just means you've got to be bold and you've got to make those risky decisions.
People might think, well, why would they go from a big company to a very small company? Because they want a bigger impact in a shorter space of time, and they're closer to the ultimate authority if they're not the CEO.
You can always find a reason not to do something. You look at our business, we've done 5 M&A transactions in 3 years. I think that shows the commitment to actually the outcome.
You can never eliminate the risk of making a mistake when it comes to human beings, but you can do enough due diligence to understand whether that person will fit into that environment and that workplace culture.
2 things. I mentioned people's the first one, the other one's capital. You've got both of those aligned well with a strong balance sheet and you've got the right personnel. Mining problems can be solved.
What is your unique value proposition that you pitch to prospective executives when they're considering alternative opportunities with more established companies? Alex Rovira, welcome to Hearts and Minds.
David, thank you for having me.
Good to see you.
Likewise.
You're the second former professional rugby player I've had on the podcast.
Assuming the first one was John Wellborn.
Well, look, if he was here, he'd say that he was the better one because he was born in WA. He's not a Queenslander like you. He went to Scotch College. You went to Hale School. And he'd probably say he was better looking as well.
I might query a few of those. He definitely was a better rugby player, though. As a Wallaby, that is a fact.
He's got a sense of humour, and he's doing well with his business, as you're doing well at Brightstar Resources.
Thank you.
You were trained in geology and corporate finance, and you spent about 9 years with Canaccord as an investment banker before transitioning into the mining industry itself. And for the past 3.5 years or so, you've been the MD of Brightstar. And very busy, it seems, expanding the company's gold portfolio through a series of acquisitions that I understand has landed you with a resource base of about 4 million ounces.
That's correct. Yep.
And the company's now on track to become, in due course, a significant mid-tier producer in the coming years.
That's certainly the aspiration, and we've got the assets and the team to execute.
Yeah, well done on all of that.
Thank you.
Before we get into the main topics of leadership and engagement and culture development, tell us about your early formative years. Where did you grow up?
So I was born in Queensland. My father is a geologist, so we travelled around a little bit for his work. So I was born in Queensland, spent a few years in Darwin, and essentially was raised in Perth. So Perth was primary school and senior school, and Perth has been home. Went to Hale School all the way through primary and senior school. Grew up in a pretty competitive household, one of 3 boys. I'm the youngest. There's about 1 centimetre that separates the 3 of us. I am the tallest, for the record. So a lot of sport, a lot of academics. Enjoyed school, enjoyed university. Ended up doing a double degree at University of WA, Bachelor of Science and a Bachelor of Commerce. Funnily enough, when I did the geology degree and Bachelor of Science, it wasn't what I kind of set out to do. And ironically, Tony, my dad, kind of said, look, geology's kind of swings and roundabouts. Maybe don't do that and do something else. So ironically, he actually kind of talked me out of it. And for whatever reason, I was doing chemistry and physics and a few other things and maths, and then just pivoted back to earth science, which I enjoyed, had a passion for, and ended up having a major in geology.
Your 2 brothers, did they enjoy running into people as well, like you?
They did. Yeah, they certainly did. We played a lot of rugby growing up all the way through, and we ran into each other a lot as well.
Did you enjoy school? Was it or were you focused on the sports and hobbies at the time?
No, I love school. Yeah. Just the competitive environment, playing sport, academics, pushing yourself. Yeah, it was certainly an enjoyable time.
Yeah, it's a great school with a great reputation for the breadth of its curriculum.
Absolutely.
And the opportunities it gives kids. Was Inverarity the principal in those days?
No, so he'd just finished probably a few years before.
Yeah.
And it was Principal Mead.
When you're not concentrating on your work, how do you relax?
Well, good question. I've got 2 young daughters, so if I'm not working, I'm usually at home and trying to be a present father, so that takes up a lot of time. If I'm not working or parenting, I'll try and get in the water, surfing, diving, fishing, spearfishing. Well, less of that now these days with a few of the recent shark incidents. So, I love water. I used to do a little bit of flying as well. I've got my pilot's license, so I used to, when I had a bit more free time, go flying out to Rottnest or down south. That's certainly something I'd like to revisit once I get a bit more bandwidth back in the life. And flying around Alaska or the Kimberley in a seaplane would be a pretty cool job.
Wow,
idea one day.
Do you bump into Wayne Bramwell at the beach? I know he's a keen surfer.
I haven't, fortunately, but I do know that Wayne can surf.
What does leadership mean to you when you think about the personal qualities and the competencies that contribute towards good leadership?
Yeah, look, interesting. For me, I think the leadership comes in a few kind of buckets. I think the first one is establishing the business that enables the opportunity to retain and attract really strong professionals. So it's about setting that strategy, actually having a business case that makes sense. And that was something that we were very focused on in the early years of Brightstar, and ensuring that the business that we were trying to build genuinely had the legs to be a mid-tier producer. I think that scale business has a lot more better opportunity to attract high caliber, high performing professionals than perhaps if you set your sights a little bit lower of a let's just say a smaller producer or something like that. So the first piece is always about ensuring the business strategy was set up, and then it's about attracting, retaining that talent, and providing the environment, and the framework for people to excel. You need to hire people to be high-performing leaders, give them the framework where they can feel like they can lead, they can step up, and something that we believe pretty strongly in at Brightstar is giving people that opportunity to step into the role.
And I guess different forms of leadership are more appropriate at different stages of the project life cycle of a company, aren't they? I mean, presumably a big part of your job is being a salesman in the sense of pitching the vision and the hope and engaging with investors and shareholders. You've got to sell the value proposition, don't you?
Absolutely, yeah, and it goes both ways too. Like, you're also an internal salesman to your staff, and ensuring that there's engagement and a willingness to commit to the business, and that also lends itself into attracting talent and getting people to come to work for the business. So it's as much as selling it to ourselves and the team as well as the market.
And I guess having, to some degree, a risk profile and having the courage, because you have to make some, gutsy decisions, don't you, along the journey of developing a small business into a mid-tier. So when you reflect on that, what are some of the decisions or actions you've taken that have required a bit of a leap of faith and a lot of courage?
Yeah, look, that's a really interesting question, David. I have a saying I say to myself sometimes, that no cowards ever make history. And I think it just means you've got to be bold, and you've got to make those risky decisions. And obviously you need to do it, judiciously, and you're not just taking risk for risk's sake, but you do need to be bold and take that risk. And for us, in the infancy of Brightstar, that was important. An M&A transaction, for example, can have 100 different false starts. You can not go ahead for a myriad of reasons. M&A always falls over. Ask any M&A banker how many pitch decks they've done and how many actually execute, and you're talking, very low percentile actually projects that complete. So you can always find a reason not to do something. You look at our business, we've done 5 M&A transactions in 3 years. I think that shows the commitment to actually the outcome. If you think the idea was good enough, you need to have that commitment and have that resolve to actually persevere with it. And I think that mentality, is certainly pretty rife within the Brightstar business. I think we've attracted a lot of people that want to take those calculated risks and try and build something.
With the M&As and with the fundraising, it must be a huge advantage having come from the other side of the desk, so to speak, from an investment banking profession. Do you find that's been a huge help in your career as a miner?
Yeah, look, I think so. Certainly in the early infancy of Brightstar and where the business got to where it is today. In my career prior to Brightstar, I had the opportunity to work with countless boards and management teams across the mining sector, and principally what I did was metals and mining, and it was very clear early on that there's no right skill set that makes a good mining executive. That you could be a great geologist, a great engineer, an accountant. You could be a banker. You could be anything. And equally on the other side, you just because you might be a very good mining engineer or geologist doesn't make you a good executive.
Yes,
and
correct.
That was something I kind of was always a learning that I had in the back of my mind with career aspirations of what I wanted to do, and came into running Brightstar from a little bit of a different pathway to maybe other mining CEOs or managing directors, and from that investment banking pathway. But I think it gives me a pretty balanced kind of read on what's required to be a leader and what's required to running a mining business. Yeah. And ultimately it's problem solving, and whether that's people management, financial problems, the market, mining, geology, whatever it is, I'm of the view that a mining executive is essentially just problem solving on any one period of time. So there is there's not one shoe that fits all in terms of what's the skill set required. And I think my background helped me in that journey.
Another quality that many of my guests refer to, Alex, is vulnerability. As a means of by putting on the test on the table the deficiencies that you have, it tends to invite people to trust you because you're not coming across as an arrogant know-it-all. You're a work in progress, and there are areas for you to improve. Do you find that declaring your vulnerabilities to your people has been helpful to building those relationships?
Absolutely. Yeah, look, trust is obviously the cornerstone of leadership and of a high-performing business. I would like to think that I can appreciate where my deficiencies are, be it technical or leadership-wise, and knowing what I don't know. And I think that's probably a really important part of any leader. I've worked with countless boards over the last 15 odd years. You work with countless boards over, I'm not going to say the year, but maybe 20 or 30 years. But you can see, and we've all had experiences with management teams or management that might think they do know everything, and you can just see like the lack of the teamwork and the cohesion when you do have that kind of characteristic sometimes within an organisation. So it's something I'm a big believer in is hiring well and knowing where your gaps are in the organisation, and it's something that it might be vulnerability, but it's also just self-awareness and knowing what you're good at and what you're not good at.
Yeah, having a good EQ and having a certain level of humility goes a long way.
And being able to listen.
Yeah, correct. And having a board that, treats you as a very capable and professional executive, but the relationship is such that they can counsel you, perhaps get you to see blind spots that maybe you didn't realise you had. It's teamwork, isn't it? Tell us about some of the key challenges of your current job at Brightstar.
So, yeah, look, where we are at the moment, I wouldn't say there's any unique challenges to Brightstar. Look, the projects, just for context, we're in Western Australia. We're a gold miner, an aspiring gold miner. That means we produce a finished product on site. You sell it to the Perth Mint or ABC refinery and you're paid 24, 48 hours later. You don't have to worry about product qualification and shipping and downstream and global geopolitical concerns. So as a mining business, let's call it, gold mining in WA is arguably as simple as it comes. So there's no deep, I suppose, risk to Brightstar or complication that's unique to us. There are plenty of kind of industry-wide challenges that certainly kind of keep a lot of focus for us. And the first one is people. Attracting and retaining really strong professionals is a key one. We're in a hot market for it. Obviously, the various commodities are all doing really well. There's a number of new mining projects being built. So people is absolutely a challenge.
Let's talk about that. So what is your unique value proposition that you pitch to prospective executives or managers in your business when they're considering alternative opportunities with perhaps bigger, more established companies?
We are quite unique in our growth aspirations. So we are undertaking the construction of our processing plant south of Laverton for our Goldfields project. That'll see us producing 75,000 ounces per annum from next year. That's an interesting size business. The flagship asset, however, is Sandstone, and we're looking to bring that online in about 18 months' time. It's quite unique for a developer to have two material projects that are going to get built arguably kind of consecutively or within 1 year. So all going well, we build Goldfields over next year and then we go straight into building Sandstone. That is a really unique proposition to professionals. You actually get the ability to build a business from the ground up, build your own teams, put your DNA, fingerprint on a company. Again, that's really exciting. I mean, we've been quite successful attracting talent out of the mid-tier miners purely for that basis. You can leave, a miner that's capped at $3 or $4 billion that arguably you've got, more reliable income, a higher income. We can't compete like for like on fixed rem and things like that. But I think that employee value proposition of the opportunity to build something and ideally building two projects consecutively is very unique.
Yeah, it's a very good point. And as an executive recruiter, I often target people in the likes of Rio Tinto and BHP, Fortescue, the big companies, and pitch a position to them that is, a junior, a developer of a project. And on face value, people might think, well, why would they go from a big company to a very small company? But very often it's because they want a bigger impact in a shorter space of time, and they're closer to the ultimate authority. If they're not the CEO, they can make a difference in a shorter space of time. And they enjoy the thrill of the chase and the risk associated with developing a business from close to nothing.
Absolutely. We've two of our kind of key leaders in the organisation. One recently joined us from BHP, one previously with Hanroy, big iron ore miners, arguably better paid, and both made the comments in the first few months of them joining, like, why didn't I do this sooner? Like, this is exciting. It's it's a little bit risky, but it's organised chaos. You're on the same floor as the board or the geology team or the engineering team, and there's a lot more cut through with decision making, and you feel that you're a lot more impactful. And I think that's quite exciting for the right kind of minded professional.
Yeah, that's right. How best should companies incentivize their people? In other words, what behaviours should be encouraged and rewarded by financial and non-financial means?
So for Brightstar and from a financial perspective, we are a believer in incentivising people with STIs and LTIs with performance rights. From my perspective, we can align that with pretty clear value creative, catalysts that the owners of the business, the shareholders, can actually recognise. Things like delivering mine production and costs and safety, projects on time and on budget, reserve growth, things that are actually tangible, linked to share price performance metrics and things like that. So I think ultimately, if the owners of the business, the shareholders, are doing well out of an investment, they're going to be very supportive of management, being rewarded for that. So that goes all the way down the workforce. So if we can continue to incentivise our employees with things like STIs and LTIs that are aligned to truly value creative opportunities and hurdles, and I think that's well rewarded.
LTIs are very effective at what they're designed to do, and that's retaining the loyalty of people. And again, as a recruiter, I find it challenging sometimes when you're approaching somebody that's got many hundreds of thousands of dollars potentially in the equivalent shares or performance rights. It's very hard for that person to leave that amount of investment on the table to go to a new position. But increasingly, I'm finding companies are prepared to pay at least part, if not all, of the LTI component to get somebody across. It's a big investment, but for really high quality people's, companies need to consider doing that.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's essentially a sign-on bonus that's equal to what someone would be leaving behind ultimately. And I think if it's for the right person, then absolutely. Look, it's the market we're in, and it's all about execution. I think about our business and the risks ahead of us, and it comes down to two things. I mentioned people's the first one, the other one's capital. And I think if you've got both of those aligned well with a strong balance sheet and you've got the right personnel, mining problems can be solved with the right people and the right capital.
Workplace culture, Alex, gets a lot of attention from people. What meaning do you attach to the word culture? It's often used with various sort of meanings, but what do you understand by the term?
Yeah, from my perspective, culture is really what people do when no one's watching them. It's how people apply themselves to a task, how they work with a team when they're not being told to. It's their accountability, and it's ultimately that's how high performing teams work. And I think the culture piece, it's a word that gets thrown around, but it needs to be tangible, and it's always continuing. No workplace would ever say, hey, we've got the greatest culture and we don't need to worry about it. I think there's always management changes, there's always external things that kind of, a mine might change, you might start one, close one down, start a new one up. Culture can vary between sites, can vary between open pit and undergrounds, can vary between the site team and the corporate head office. So I think you just need to have that acknowledgement that culture is dynamic and it changes and it needs to be constantly fed. If you don't look after culture, it looks after itself.
That's right. And it needs to be rooted or based in a small number of core values, which are non-negotiable, I think. Everyone's got their own set of values, but provided that set of values includes a subset that are important for the business. If I look at my business, we've got 3 values, care, courage, and imagination. And we explain to people what those terms mean to us. And we ask questions to try and minimise the risk that they're joining a company that they're just not aligned to in terms of a basic value. So, everyone's different, but we need to be on the same page in terms of what's really important.
Yeah, so agreed. And we've got 5 values in our organisation. The first one's safety, which obviously kind of speaks for itself. Second one's gold standard. We're a big believer in high performers. I work and the executive team works significant hours in this business to try and build something from scratch. And, building a business takes effort and it takes time, and it's all about doing your job to that gold standard. Adaptable. We need to be dynamic. The world's always changing. The mining industry is changing. Commodity prices change. You can't just sit there and say, oh, this is what we said we'd do, we're going to do it. You need to be adaptable and adjust to the environment you're in. And respect and be real, the last two. And I think the last two speak to what we're discussing here, and that's that culture piece and teamwork and cohesion and actually kind of ensuring that the environment's there for people to execute and do their jobs well.
One of the key things I try and look for in a candidate is their ability or their history or track record of being able to make decisions under conditions of volatility and ambiguity and uncertainty, because that's the world we live in, and you can't just put everything on hold while everything clarifies. You do have to make decisions as best you can with the information you've got. I'm sure you're put in a position regularly where you need to make decisions under those conditions.
Absolutely. Yeah, like you have to. It's a function of running a mining business. As I said, it's a very dynamic industry. The gold price has been incredibly volatile for the last few years. It's arguably really good for the last 2.5 years, and the last 3 or 4 months has been extremely challenging. And the gold equities suffer on the back of that. And so it's ensuring that the workforce feels like there's a stable environment there to operate in, and trying to take that instability or ambiguity away from your people, and you wear it yourself.
What would you say is the biggest challenge facing the Australian mining industry today?
Good question. Look, it's a very competitive labour market, as you're well aware. So, I think broadly speaking, making sure that the industry can attract and retain key professionals is a big one. Arguably, the mining industry probably hasn't done a great job in selling itself globally. There's all sorts of stats you can read about the average age of mining engineers and geologists, globally, and retirement age is coming up and what that means for workforces and the amount of copper that needs to be mined in the next 20 years. And there's some frightening stats that all point to the fact that we don't have enough quality mining professionals to meet the output that we need. And arguably that's the industry probably hasn't had a good job of selling itself to the wider masses. We're fortunate here. We live in WA. Everyone lives and breathes mining. You can go to a barbecue and you can talk about iron ore or gold. Everyone's asking what lithium's doing, and there's that assumed knowledge of the mining industry because it's a key driver of our industry and GDP. But you go overseas, you go to Melbourne or you go over east, and that can be very different. And I don't think, broadly speaking, the mining industry, I think we could do a lot better in selling that to new generations.
Yeah, I think industry representative bodies like AMEC, Warren Pearce's outfit, and Tanya Constable's MCA, I think they're doing some really good initiatives in terms of marketing the mining industry to younger people, getting them on site, getting them educated and what it means to be a mining professional and why we need to mine these minerals in order to maintain the civilization we've got. So I think that's really important, both education and marketing. A lot of my guests would say they're very frustrated with the slowness or the duplication of approval processes as well. Is that something that you would identify with?
Yes. In short, like we've all, I think no matter what you're trying to do in the mining industry, there is a view that sometimes the approvals timeline or the process itself can seem a little bit cumbersome. Look, I know the departments are trying to cut that red tape, and there is a clear plan, I suppose, in place that they're trying to articulate. This is what they're trying to do. We've experienced good and bad approvals processes. I think the reality is it's just the world we live in, and you just need to deal with it and you need to address it. I think if you do the work well and you engage early with the department and you get onto it, you can always try and manufacture or deliver a favourable outcome. But it's about being proactive. If you just sat there and waited for your approvals to come back, you could be waiting a while.
How is Brightstar using AI technologies to improve the effectiveness and the efficiency of work processes?
So we are implementing an AI policy at the moment, just trying to kind of bring it all under one umbrella. Various pockets of the business might use Claude or ChatGPT or different kind of providers, and it's an amazing asset, right? It's a great tool to fast track the output of documents and presentations and analysing complex data sources, and I use it a lot for research and kind of what might have taken 2 or 3 hours before going through ASX announcements can literally be done in 3 minutes. It is a tool, like it needs to be used judiciously and appropriately, and you need to have the right frameworks around it. So just trying to ensure that we don't data integrity and things like that's important. So just trying to manage that in a dynamic world where it changes, arguably day to day.
Yeah. It's really taken the world by storm, hasn't it? Really, over the past year or so.
Absolutely.
I mean, first of all, I think there was OpenAI's ChatGPT, but there are so many alternatives now, and increasingly cheap alternatives, mainly coming out of China.
Yep.
Reminds me of the EV industry. China comes to the party and does things extremely efficiently. So I do wonder, in several years' time, whether all of these different large language model platforms will still exist, or whether they'll have been consolidated into a much fewer number.
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see. Obviously, we're at the kind of the start of that industry and that life cycle. For me personally, like I use it to do, as I mentioned, research on projects or companies or history, and it's amazing how quickly it can pull out that data and how good it is. You do still need to apply a critical thinking lens over the top. The output sometimes is not always right. That's incorrect, and it'll correct itself. But it's a task that took hours can take minutes.
It's getting more sophisticated over time, isn't it? And maybe a couple of years from now, you won't need to cast that eye over the output to the same degree anyway. Yeah. Do you have a question for me, Alex, without notice?
Oh, okay. How are you seeing the industry for recruitment for senior operational roles, project GMs, senior side executives, not quite C-suite, but very experienced mining professionals?
Yeah, good question. Look, it's because I'm a specialist and I've dedicated myself to the mining industry for quite a long time now. It's still a relatively small community of people, and you get to know them. In some cases, you're friends with them. So when I'm asked to do a search, let's say at the GM operations level, I can immediately think of a network of people that I know or know of that I could easily approach. And for those that I don't know, then, we do a search of the marketplace and quickly come up with a list. So identifying people that have the capability to do the job is not the hard bit. We can tick the boxes. Yes, got the right qualifications, got the right level of experience for the right amount of time. The biggest challenge, I think, for a recruiter and for anybody about to hire someone is to assess their character. Two things make a person very, very effective: capability and then character. So when I say character, I'm referring to values, the ability of the person to adjust and adapt to an environment, and someone, that has the personality that will relate to their immediate boss and be an effective mentor and coach and leader to a group of people as well. So that's where I guess the insight and the judgment of a person becomes really important. So to answer your question, I suppose it's not all that hard to assemble a long list of candidates for any given position. Frankly, the more senior the position, the easier it gets, because there is a smaller and smaller pool of people that you should have to select from. But you need to get to know the character of the person. That's always important. You can never eliminate the risk of making a mistake when it comes to human beings, but you can do enough due diligence and hard work to understand whether that person will fit into that environment and that workplace culture and get on with that person.
If you don't mind an extension, how do you do that due diligence? How do you get comfortable with someone's character? How many face-to-face meetings or coffees does it take to get a read of the ability for them to integrate?
Look, in my case, it's getting face-to-face at least twice, probably on 3 occasions with the person in different environments. I'm a firm believer that the best way to interview a candidate, I don't often use that word, but the best place to have a business conversation with someone is by sharing a coffee or sharing a meal in a cafe or a restaurant, because you get to look at not only do you have an opportunity to delve into their experience and try and verify their accomplishments, but you also get to see how that person interacts with other people around them. So, for example, the waiter comes, delivers the coffee. Will that candidate that you're talking to look that waiter in the eye and say thank you? Very often they don't. Now, it may seem a small thing, but to me that level of professional courtesy is important, and it gives me some insight as to the character of that person.
Sure.
So I place a lot of importance on face-to-face meetings, several of them. I know a lot of people in the recruitment industry find doing Teams interviews very convenient, and they are. But to me, there's nothing better than getting face-to-face with someone. So I go through I spend a lot of time with candidates before I present them to the client. I also need to understand who on the referee list that the candidate gives me will give me genuine, authentic feedback on the person.
Sure.
And sometimes I say to the candidate, look, I know you work for X, 6 or 7, 8 years ago. They're not on your list of referees. Do you mind if I speak with this person? And how they react to that, again, tells you something. So you need to identify people that have a good, intimate knowledge of the person. Very often it's a former boss, but not necessarily. It could be a peer, a colleague, or it could be an external person from the organisation, someone who's acted as a service provider and got to know the person from that angle. So look, it's a collection of things, Alex, but gee, you've got to invest your time and effort into doing that well, because at the end of the day, it's a very costly mistake if you put the wrong person in the job.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Rapid fire questions. We live in a troubled world. What gives you hope?
Oh, it is a troubled world. Lots going on in the macro, obviously, at the moment. But for me, it's about controlling the things that I can control, and that's my business and that's my family. And raising 2 young girls, that gives me hope. Raising independent, smart young women that have a passion for being little rascals, but also wanting to learn and that. And I think that for me is where you can see that hope, and that's that next generation. Outside of that, you can lose hours in sleep wondering about the Strait of Hormuz and Iran, or what's happening in Ukraine, and arguably sitting here in Perth, it's difficult to actually be impactful in changing some of those troubles. So more kind of focused on the things that are in my orbit.
Yeah, makes sense. At any moment in time, most of us are in some form of transition. Are you at a crossroads in terms of what you do, or how are you approaching your development as a professional executive?
Look, certainly not at any crossroads or transitional piece. I think our business is really just getting started. It's been 3 years, and I feel like on some days it's felt like 30 years, and some days it's felt like 6 months. And I think the growth journey for the next 2 or 3 years is exciting. So if anything, the transition piece is into more work, more risk, and more excitement.
As you build your business and it becomes more valuable, I guess you're waiting for the phone call one day, or if it already hasn't happened, just from another company saying, look, we'd like to talk with you about acquiring your business.
Yeah, look, I think that's a real risk for us, to be completely honest. I think the opportunity and what we're building here is very unique in terms of the potential production profile and the asset base we've assembled. And internally, we can see the value creation that we've done over the last few years. And it's arguably it's only time until that does happen. At the end of the day, we work for the shareholders. If there was a great outcome there that delivered a return to the people that own the business, then fantastic. I'm of the view that we've still got at least 3 or 4 or 5 years in us to build a business that is going to justify the value that we can see.
Looking through your rear vision mirror, what accomplishment are you most proud of?
Look, everything with Brightstar's been pretty cool. It started with 2 or 3 employees and essentially no assets in the business, and now we've got over 4 million ounces. Building a mine, running a mine, building a mill, and got a couple hundred people in the organisation. So that's been a really cool growth journey. I was 32 when I became managing director, arguably quite young, and it's been a lot of learning through that period. And I think it's been a really fun journey.
You certainly are young to hold the level of responsibility you have. Looking ahead, what other career or personal boxes do you have left to tick?
Wanting to see Brightstar become a mid-tier producer. Like fundamentally, this business has got 200,000 to 300,000 ounces per annum of production potential in it. And for us, it's about execution. And as I mentioned, it's about people and it's about capital. The assets are in the organisation. It's about just building it out and doing our jobs well. So that for me would be the ultimate box to tick. Take something from essentially nothing to a mid-tier status over 5 or 6 years would be a pretty admirable feat, and that's certainly something that we are resolutely focused on.
We spoke a little bit about vulnerabilities earlier. We're all a work in progress. What's an aspect of your leadership that you're keen to improve to help you get the business to the point where it might be in 4 or 5 years' time?
Look, leadership's like anything, it's something that you can always kind of improve upon. It's like going to the gym. So one of the things I think I'd personally would like to kind of get better at is probably making the harder decisions swiftly. Certainly as it pertains to maybe people management and hiring and firing and performance managing personnel and changing of teams. And our business has gone through significant change from as I mentioned, a couple of employees to now well over 100 and growing. So I think making those decisions swiftly and making the harder decisions swiftly is important, and it's probably something I could potentially get better at.
What energizes you the most?
Oh, everything. I'm a pretty energetic person by nature. I enjoy getting out of bed every day and going to work. I like the challenge of what we're trying to build. I've been called many names that pertains to it. Energizer Bunny's one of them. Cockroach is another one because they can't be killed. That one's less favourable. But I think, energy is not an issue.
And what drains you of energy?
Nothing. Just keep showing up every day.
What's your inner monologue like? We all talk to ourselves. I certainly do. Do you tend to be hard on yourself or complimentary to yourself?
I'd say quite hard. Yeah, I'm a pretty hard taskmaster of myself. Yeah, as I said, I'm pretty happy to work pretty long hours with what we're trying to do. I'm afforded a really unique opportunity here to try and build a business and work with an awesome team and execute in a ripping gold price environment. Everything's kind of, the tailwinds are there to build a business of scale. And yeah, that's really exciting. But, that said, you need to keep showing up. You need to be resilient. You need to show up every day like it's your last. And I'm a pretty hard critic of myself.
That's a common characteristic I find of people that I interview on this podcast. They are not necessarily perfectionists, but they're always driving themselves to become better, to improve. What's your media diet like? In other words, how do you keep yourself informed?
Look, no one kind of media content is, I read the paper, watch a bit of news, a lot online. I think kind of trying to take all of that and trying to actually dissect what's real, what's not, what biases are being applied, what's the lens that someone's looking at it through. And when you're watching the ABC, it might be very different to watching a different news provider, and just probably being aware of that. So I try and consume all different types of media and try and understand different perspectives, and then try and make my own somewhat informed decision about what's actually real.
And I think it's becoming increasingly harder to discern the truth from something that's been fabricated.
Absolutely.
With all the technologies and AI and so on, you've got to look twice, 3 times at something before you make a judgment. Is this actually real or is it artificial? If you think about leaders, living or deceased, that you admire, who would you most like to have a conversation with, and what would be the most important question you'd ask that person?
Oh, I'll go into the sporting world. Cameron Smith, rugby league player, ex-Melbourne Storm and State of Origin Maroons and Australia, over 400 games of NRL, one of the most successful rugby league captains and players. Not an amazing athlete, not wasn't necessarily big or fast or super silky skillful wise, but just had everything and was a really good captain. Would love to kind of dive into the detail of, how do you prepare yourself to be the best in the business for 20 years, arguably is what he did. Sport has its highs and its lows, and for him, Cam Smith showed up every week and every year and was an awesome footy player. And I admire someone like that. You're not an expert in any one field. You're not 6'6" and 140 kilos. You're just very good at everything. And I think I quite like that.
Did you play alongside him?
No. I play rugby union, but I just. Yeah, respect that career.
Yeah. So when you observe him, why is he a standout captain? Putting aside the on-field skills of the guy, off the field, why was he such a good captain?
Always perceived or looked to be cool, calm, and collected when things weren't going right. He was very kind of chilled. When you listen to him, now after retirement, very well educated, speaks really well, and you can see how players responded and respected to that and respect that. So, I think he was just a very well-balanced player and captain, and, the most successful captain for those teams. So pretty awesome to have, that career of the tenure that he did.
Who would be a sporting coach that you most admire?
Oh, that's a good question. Unsure. I'll have to come back to you on that one.
What's the best career or business advice you've been given?
Persistency is key. And we've touched on a few of those elements, but there's success isn't a one-off, exploration success or a mine success, or success to me in business means you do it day in, day out. And there's some successful operators out there, like someone like Mark Clark or Ralph Finlayson in the gold mining sector, that have done very well for 20 years. They've done the same thing exceptionally well for lots of different companies, different mines, and clearly there's some qualification or some area within how they operate that kind of leads to that success. And I think that for me is personified by being persistent and just showing up.
Ralph Finlayson's a very interesting example, and I've observed that he's such a good mentor and coach of his people. I think I'm right in saying that he never presented at Diggers and Dealers. Someone like Matt Nixon, now the CEO of the business, does that now. But even before, he'd get someone else from the company to do it, to help them in their education of presenting to investors and an audience. He's a humble man.
Absolutely.
It goes a long way.
Definitely.
Final question, Alex, what advice would you give your 20-year-old self to help you lead a better quality life?
Continue to work hard. take those risks and be bold. I think that's all you can do in this life, and be prepared, do the work. For me, it just keeps coming back to doing the work. You need to have an understanding of everything that you're doing, and make educated decisions, but take that risk.
Yeah, and do the reps.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, look, I think John Wellborn, if he was here, would say, look, I take it all back. This bloke's very impressive. So thanks very much for being part of the podcast. You seem to have a great business, and I'd love to see where you are 3, 4, 5 years from now, and perhaps you can come back at a future time and tell us how Brightstar's progressed.
Absolutely. Would love to. Thank you very much, David.
Thanks, Alex. Thanks for being here, and thanks to Flynn on the production desk at Podwave Studios, and thanks to Carol Wilson and Alana Bray-White, my colleagues, for helping put this together. See you next time.
Thanks for tuning in to Hearts and Minds. If you enjoyed this episode, please take a moment to leave us a rating or share it with a friend. And don't forget to follow us and connect on social media for updates on all of our upcoming guests. I'm Alana Bray-White, and I look forward to you joining us for our next episode.